Warm welcome to all our listeners to the next episode of Equiverse Voices. Equiverse, a universe where gender equity is the norm. Here we explore various pathways for building and fostering a gender equitable world. In today's episode, we are delving into the delicate balance between personal and professional lives of women. How do we navigate the complexities of maintaining a balanced life in our busy lives? Joining us are two remarkable individuals who bring a wealth of experience and wisdom to our discussion. First, we have Sumitra Mishra. She has made a career for herself in the development sector over the past 30 years. In her current role as the CEO of Mobile Creches, she leads early childhood development programs that hold huge promise in creating gender transformative societies. Her organization runs thousands of creches and daycare centers for children of migrant workers, enabling millions of economically disadvantaged mothers to work without worrying about the safety of their children while contributing successfully to the society, enabling other women to join the workforce. She has also raised a family. Her journey towards her own aspiration is inspirational to many. Alongside Sumitra, we have Lavang Khare, an expert in communication over 2 decades of corporate experience in brand building and handling top business houses across various sectors. She too has managed a very demanding and very successful career along with her family commitments. With her first hand experience of navigating personal and professional life very successfully, Lavang brings valuable insights to our conversation today. Welcome, Lavang. Now let's dive into exploring how one can navigate personal and professional balance and how more and more women can be part of our workforce. Over to you, Lavang.
Thank you, Ipsita, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Let's ditch the delicate balance talk today. We are tackling equality in the workplace and how it impacts women's lives. Can we finally smash the myth of the juggling champion and achieve a sustainable work life rhythm? Joining us today is Dr. Sumitra, an individual who's the CEO of Mobile Creches India. Sumitra, CEO of the Mobile Creches, champions early childhood development, running thousands of centers for migrant workers' children, fostering gender transformative societies. Sumitra, welcome.
Thank you, Lavang.
So, my first question to you is, what are the biggest roadblocks women face in achieving work life quality? Is it an expectation to carry a heavier load at home and at office, or the pressure to choose between career milestones and important personal commitments?
So, Lavang, the thing is that we all know that women are constantly having to prove themselves, both at home and at work too. They are working much harder to prove that they can do an equally good job, if not better than their male peers. For example, women taking a few days off is not really an indication of their lack of consistency towards their work, or requiring flexibility in work timings is not because they are negligent. Rather, they have a real responsibility too, but often they are judged otherwise. Um, but mostly, it doesn't help that women are conditioned from a very early age that for them, home and family comes first, that the nurturer's role of a woman takes over. Therefore, any priority to a career is seen as a woman who has often failed. Typical household level challenges, such as a messy house, a sick child at home, these challenges are often amplified as lack of care and attention of the woman towards her family. But the irony is that women's productive years coincide with their best reproductive years too. And she is carrying more than half the burden of continuing the circle of humanity by caring for her young children to her elderly parents and in laws as the two bookending the peak of her career graph. In that sense, men and women don't really have an equitable start, do they? Also, because there is something that's pushing them out, because the jobs that they get or work for, the HR policies, the work infrastructure, the working environment, these are not really adequately designed to support and celebrate the universal truth of the world, and that the women's biological and physiological clocks work differently from men. It is time that we stop making some cosmetic changes in our diversity and inclusion policies and really take a paradigm leap to design policies that are universal for both women and men as well. But Lavang, these are some of the things that we all experience personally, and that is experienced universally across women across the world. But what I want to really point out as the biggest challenge to the response to the question that you asked is that women across all ages are constantly fighting against the burden of no expectations. Why do I say no expectations? Because it's really a misnomer that women are struggling against high expectations. Young girls, young women, even sometimes older women at home and at work are constantly reminded you cannot do it. You are not meant to do this job. It's against this constant reminder that you are less, you are lower than the young boys and the men that women are conditioned from a very early age to fight against. And then taking on that responsibility of finding the perfect work life balance almost single handedly and often at great cost to their personal health and well being. And in that sense, I don't think I'm any different from the millions of women out there uh, not working, not more importantly, not having a career that I'm passionate about, was the standard expectation from childhood, I would say. And that is the tide against which I have fought throughout my 30 years of working life. And in fact, even earlier in an attempt to seek higher education. And that then works in a cyclic pattern, which makes work life, the dream equitable balance, so much harder.
Sumitra, I think what you said just touches my heart, because I see a lot of women around me and relate to what you're saying. And I think some of us are more privileged than others are. I've had a childhood and an upbringing where I've had support from my ecosystem completely and my family as well. But at the same time, even today, and both of us have spent over 2.5 decades working. Even today, I see the young women going through a lot of issues at work and at home. So, what do you think should one do to best support women to find an equilibrium? Because we all need to support, but how can we create a world where men and women will share responsibilities, whether it's bringing up their children, housework? How can colleagues become champions for equality and not just be people who are standing on the side? What's your
So
view on
you're
that?
talking of an equilibrium, Lavang. Uh, let's put this in perspective. More than 80% of women in India spend more than 5 hours every day in their daily domestic work and caregiving responsibilities for the children and elderly, compared to around 26% men doing the same work for less than 2 hours a day. And this is as per the Time Use Survey of India done in 2019, where women carry 40% more burden of unpaid work than men in India. And this is where the devil lies, really. While working environments and supportive policies are required for women to enter and fully participate in the workforce, the real challenge, the real pull factor, pulling women out of the workforce, lies in our homes. So, what really needs to change within our homes? Well, to begin with, I think girls and boys from their early childhood years must be socialized towards housework as shared work. Brothers and sisters can have fun doing the same work at home. Mostly important, another factor is that male role models within the family environment, fathers, uncles, grandfathers, are seen as taking up equal responsibility for housework and caregiving roles as a norm and not as a favor, something to do once in a while. But even in this, within our own homes, women have a very big role to play in pushing against the tide. They must get over their conditioning. It is their duty. That the world will stamp them as negligent homemakers is something that women are conditioned for. Therefore, if you ask me, it's again left to women and supporting men in our lives to take the lead in building a really inclusive home environment. If you have to look at the deep rooted cultural systems, particularly in the context of India, then the cultural systems can only begin with change from our own homes. But while we are doing all this working within the home and changing the balance, the power balance structures, what needs to change at the workplace? It's it's a no-brainer. We've got to really design and implement truly gender transformative policies that respond to the changing needs of men and women workers. This includes employees from across the gender spectrum and employees with disabilities. It's got to be universal for everyone. Look at these policies as family friendly policies that provide parental leaves instead of just maternity leaves, provide for childcare as a benefit for all employees, and encourage help men take affirmative decisions, male employees to avail parental leaves and childcare benefits. Of course, in the world of technological advancements and AI taking over our lives so rapidly, we can maximize technology to support flexible work schedules and work from home systems, both for men and women. But the more important thing here I want to point out, Lavang, is that we really need data, because a lot of this is a lot of talk and talk that people like you and me are doing without necessary research and data to back up the cost of inaction. What is it really costing companies and governments in terms of economic growth? And the absence of family friendly policies is what we need to lay our hands on. And that will help us to help inform social security systems at a system level and make the link from social security systems to the economic systems and how they align together. So while change begins from home, the change is actually being seen in action in the workplaces. But the third and a very important dimension to this equilibrium that we are all attempting to get at is what needs to change at the societal level. I think, there are good examples now within India, and we need to shine the light on these good examples. We need marquee companies who exemplify transformative changes to talk about it. Lead by examples, influence peers. Peer learning is a great way to sustain systems changes. For the government's part, the good thing is that the government is so focused on women led development, starting with big global declarations at the G20 summit that was concluded last year. With women led development has the potential to design policies starting from education systems to skilling programs to enterprise development, job creations, credit systems, and recognizing care economy as a formal sector. These are all green areas for government to seize opportunities for creating regulatory frameworks that will bring societal level changes. And finally, I would say, I think what I've said very often earlier also, that India needs a massive mass media campaign on bending gender stereotypes around unpaid care work. Something in the lines of the highly successful Pulse Polio campaign that we all know of, were a part of our early years. And more recently, the Vote for India campaign that tallied with the recent general elections. We need big public awareness campaigns, and the secret of these campaigns lies in taking these gentle policy shifting messages and the media narrative at hyper local levels, where it touches people directly and people can identify themselves with the message and hopefully that is going to create that enabling environment in which we will see the green shoots of gender transformative equitable societies that we aspire for.
Sumitra, I really wish we could have just gone on all day. This is such an insightful conversation for me, and I'm sure for everybody else as well. So, I'm sure you're aware of the TikTok Indra Nui's comment about biological clock, which created that unnecessary pressure. Can we rewrite that narrative? Is there a way to support women's careers without really looking and emphasizing at these ticking clocks and other pressures just come so naturally and creep into our lives?
So, Lavang, the biological phase for women is a real condition. But that doesn't necessarily mean that women have to pay the motherhood penalty, right? Therefore, we need a supportive ecosystem that we've been talking about today. Young parents, both mothers and fathers, have an equal role during this so called biological clock phase. Remember, young fathers are also going through this phase, right? So, policies and actions must support all employees who are young parents in their efforts to raise healthy and happy children. After all, children are the human capital of the nation, the future workforce of India. So, there is an equal responsibility there for both the men and the women. Women have an equal responsibility, though, in imagining their role as active economic agents for their personal selves, for their families, as much as for the country's growth story. It's not going to be easy. It never is easy. Don't we know that, Lavang? There is a role for us as women to pick up our end of the bargain too and actively pursue choices that will make us equal decision makers, in turn paving the path for many more women in the future. We can get burdened by this motherhood penalty, or we can say, well, that's a part of my life, and this is a part of the phase of my life that I'm going through, and I will co travel this phase with my partner, with my husband, with the rest of my family, and build an environment around me to support me in this journey because I am going to be responsible for the choices I make during this phase of my life. But of course, for a woman to do that, she will need that enabling environment both at home and at workplace.
Yeah,
For for many women that I work with at Mobile Creches, working is not a matter of choice. It is their answer to their basic
yes.
survival, for the lives and survival of their children. And when the world is so heavily loaded against these poor migrant workers moving from place to place in search of temporary, very fragile, very discriminatory work practices and working environments, it's true that she has very few decisions in her hands. Yet, Lavang, you'll be surprised at the choices that a migrant woman from a construction site or a migrant woman worker at the rag picking, waste sorting sites, she is making in order to maintain a work life balance. These are real story examples in enterprise spirit, in courage, and in resilience. And there is a lot that I personally and all of us who are a part of this journey derive from the women that we work with. But here also, there is a big role for civil society to play in enabling a supportive ecosystem because civil society organizations have access to families in invisible, marginalized communities where often even the sometimes the government spotlight doesn't fall. What can we as civil society actors do by working with young children in creating gender equitable early childhood experiences right from a very early start, by working very closely with adolescents, young boys and young girls, in building confidence about their pathways for them to imagine an equal world and pursue choices where they can play an active role in building this society rather than as passive recipients of charitable benefits. Similarly, civil society has a big role to play in working with men and women jointly through livelihoods, through financial independence, through literacy programs, through mental health programs, in lifting each other up to create this supportive ecosystem. For civil society actors like myself, we need to remember that in order for us to create equal opportunities for women, we have to work as much with the men as co-travelers of this journey.
Sumitra, what you told me is, something that I see also. I may not be working in a similar sort of a ecosystem like you do and the kind of support that you provide. But even our domestic helps at home, a lot of them are migrant workers, and some of them have supportive families and spouses, and some don't. So when you talked about real life examples, I think it's something that we need to understand as well because of the privileged lives that we lead. But when it comes to people like you and me, and that's where I wanted to actually steer this conversation to. Um, do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, do you feel your workload is okay right now compared to your partners? I'm sure there were struggles, but what are the life stages where some of this was very unbalanced, and what actually contributed to life getting a little unbalanced at times?
Lavang, I think our personal stories will reflect with a million other women stories out there. And for me, as a young mother, juggling, traveling for work, or during that period, the support of the family, and how important it was to build a circle of support at home and work and in the neighborhood was extremely critical. After all, a village raises a child, so the saying goes, right? So
Yes.
I think, I when I look back at my work life balance, before I come to the point of this, support now, uh, during the early career, you know, busting the burden of lack of expectations was the biggest thing. I can do this. And I'm constantly proving this to myself. And by proving it to myself, I'm proving it to my family. I'm proving it at my work environment, at my wider peer circle with decision makers all the time. Uh, and when you are doing this, you are balancing it with your responsibilities of a young mother. But in my life, there was a tipping point when it came that, when the realization came that work is no longer just my passion point. uh, it has become my sustenance. Working to put food on the table is very different from working from passion. And as a woman, as a young single parent, I faced that very early. And many women face that. Many women that I work with, your domestic worker you spoke about, the thousands of women that we work with, are constantly juggling against this young family of 3 children, 4 children, a single mother, alcoholic husband, abandoned woman, and they're constantly juggling this balance from the early career. If you imagine, the life moves to the mid career phase. I think my mid career phase was dominated by my guilt of failing my young daughter. That, you know
I can
and
imagine.
that
I can
burden
imagine.
of guilt
Yes.
is something that people remind you. But more than people around you reminding you, it's your own creation in your own head, and sometimes it goes out of proportion. Till my daughter, who's now a young professional, showed me very clearly that she is who she is because I am who I am. And Lavang, it turns
Yes.
out okay. It really turns out okay if you keep the basics on track. If only I hadn't agonized so much about it during those years. What was most important during those years was having a circle of friends and family with whom I actually shared parenting experiences, because really I had to seek support to from many people, from my parents and my own siblings and extended family, to my neighbors, to my work colleagues, to support me in parenting my daughter. And Lavang, to be honest, it takes courage to expose your vulnerabilities when you are relying on others to care for your child, especially if you're a single parent and you're burdened by your guilt, to be able to ask for that help. But when I look back, and this is something that I will say going forward to every woman, ask for help. There are people out there who are ready to help, who understand, because either they've gone through something like this, or maybe they'll look at you and draw some lessons from you. So ask for help. And you come to now where you're almost at your peak career stage, and you imagine, I've finished with the early difficulties, the challenges of raising a child, supporting the family, and it's time for you to go full throttle, hit the peaks of your career. But well, life isn't really designed like this. You really come a full circle. And now, again, for me, just like for many uh, out there, care for elderly parents takes center stage. So you're again back to your caregiving role and balancing that elusive work life equilibrium. As you're hitting your peak career and your life stage at this stage, your partner needs you more now. Nurturing these intimate relationships also becomes a priority. So, you know, this is not going to go away. There is never going to be that point where there's going to be a perfect equilibrium in a scale of 1 to 10. It's going to go to 2, 3 sometimes, but it's also going to hit a 8 or 9 sometimes. And you have to embrace that swinging to say, it's all a part of life, and this all of this is adding to your life experiences, and you're still being able to keep it going by staying true and honest to yourself. So it's interesting that for the first time in my 30 years work life, I am now on a sabbatical for the first time in my career. And it fills me with wonder over the last 1 month that really, what was I have this time? What am I going to do with this time now? But it's been a wonderful experience to just step aside, step back, and, you know, go 2 steps backward before you move on 4 steps forward. So I hope and wish that many others have an opportunity like this, to have a sabbatical, a period for rest, rejuvenation, but also point of time in your life for reflection. And I think that's important. um, I do want to give a shout out in this whole work life equilibrium that none of this can be done alone. Throughout my working life, I've been privileged to have work environments that were supportive, not because of policies. Lavang, you and I started careers where work-life balance was not even a language, right? So, so it was all about human connections and human interactions, and you worked things around because you felt each other, you connected with each other, and now is a time when I, as an employer, can play that role of what is right for all and not just a few. And if that's right for all, how do you put systems into place, that things that I have benefited from personal interactions, can I make it universal at a policy level? That is a role that we should be taking seriously. If women are in charge of decisions and have a role to play in influencing work environment policies and systems, then now is the time for us to make that difference. um, you know and finally, I'll say that, learning that, it's not a personal favor, but you're not giving someone a personal favor, and you're not getting a personal favor. We have to constantly remind ourselves to do something that's right for all, and therefore to make a systemic change around it.
You know what you said about asking for help? That's so important. And I think that's something really, really important from perspective. Don't just think about the fact that you're alone and all the doors have closed, because another door is definitely going to open up. But when I hear you and the fact that you've decided to take a sabbatical, I think there are signs that come in. You need to bring down your pace and think about yourself as well. But still, women do have situations in their life where things can be quite maddening, right? And hypertasking has become core to most women from any part of society or from an economic background. So when this juggling balls drop, and how do you know you're overwhelmed? What is it, one or two things that women should look at to just be able to stay sane? I think that's something if you could touch upon briefly, because your conversation has given us a lot of perspective from a child to your office, to your parents, to your partner. If there are one or two things that you'd like to tell us to maintain sanity during all this
Uh,
madness that happens in
Lavang, it's a good
workplace.
question to ask when I'm into my sabbatical now. That sanity.
Yes.
And you are right when you say that, you have to listen to yourself. I think I was close to losing my sanity. And I was at a point of exhaustion when I said, this is it. I'm giving up. I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I'm not enjoying doing this at all. And that's when this whole discussion about taking a break started. But whilst one shouldn't reach that point of breakdown, losing one's sanity, and should be able to pick the signals much earlier, I think the bigger message here, the bigger learning for me here has been that listen to your body. Listen to your inner thoughts of what your mind, what your heart is telling you. My body was telling me that I'm not taking care of it enough. My heart and my mind were telling me that I'm not loving myself enough. Now, these are very nice words in today's world: self love, self care, and they're true, they're important things. But as women, we tend to put others first, we tend to put our responsibilities first, we tend to put our work first. Remember, I mentioned about the conditioning from early years, that you're constantly fighting against the
Yeah.
tide to prove yourself. Lavang, very honestly,
Hmm.
I had to tell myself, I'm done proving anything to anyone, starting from myself. I've got to stop. I've got to take some rest. I've got to step back. So that's the sanity point. That's the point where you are at the cusp of losing your sanity, and it's important to listen to what your head is telling you at that point. There are many theory books and management principles about work life balance. But the fact is, the reality is that some of those juggling balls that you spoke about will drop no matter what you do, how hard you try. It's embracing these moments, just like a fall and a sprain in the ankle. It heals. But for it to heal, it needs attention, it needs care, it needs someone's support for you to hold a hand or lean on a shoulder to lift yourself up during that period, right? So it's exactly the same thing
Yeah.
as I come to realize after working like a crazy woman for the last 30 years. It's okay to hold that hand, to lean on a shoulder, to stop, to give it rest. Believe in yourself, be kind to yourself. And by being kind to yourself, be kind to others. I do believe that everyone has some privileges that can be shared. Look around and be grateful for what you have, how much you have. Seek out those who need help, but struggle to ask for help. Remember, you and I have also struggled to ask for help. There are women out there who are struggling to ask for help. Can we take the first
Yes.
step and extend a hand, hold a hand? By loving myself, by being kind to myself, this has made me more responsible towards myself, but made me more responsible towards my colleagues and people that I work with also. But the hardest one here, Lavang, and something that I need to make a mental note and remind myself, I'm sure you do, and I'm sure many other women do, is letting go. We hear other people talking
Yeah.
about letting go, we hear about great leaders talking about letting go of things. It's harder. than one imagines. It needs a lot of practice. To some extent, it needs a degree of irreverence. You know, I don't care kind of an attitude. We got to build it up within ourselves that you really don't care if some things break. And I'm saying this very consciously, especially in the context of my sabbatical. Things will go slow, some things may break, some things will not get done, some things will not get done as I would have liked to do it. Those things can be mended, but let others do it. Let others have an opportunity to mend it, because mending means learning from your mistakes, right? So give others the opportunity and the privilege to learn from their own experiences. We don't have to have all the solutions for every problem or crisis. I tell myself, and I'm known at work as being a perfectionist, but in reality, what it really means is that I fear loss of control. So now is my phase where I'm saying that I'm an imperfectionist, and it's my newfound mantra. I'm happy to be an imperfectionist.
You know, I think we are in different journeys of our life, both you and I, like I said, over 2.5 decades of having worked and brought up our children as well. But think of it from a perspective of people who are at a younger stage. And when I started, I talked about, I see people around me and I work with a lot of young men and women. You know, there's something called the Sophie's choice. If you had to take a decision between going to your daughter's PTM and an important office intervention or function or activity, how did you navigate that situation? Because I've had situations in my life where I've carried my laptop in the dicky of my car when my son is getting an award at school, thinking there might be something in between that I have to step out and go send out an email. How do you actually take that discussion and navigate it in your own mind and make it happen so that you're not hurting your family and yourself as well?
Lavang, PTMs. How many PTMs
You must
I
have
would have
missed.
missed,
Yes.
you would have missed.
Yes.
How many? Lost count, right? So these are very real situations. Uh, I remember that I was traveling for work when my daughter had her first periods. Big life changing
Yes. Yes.
shift for her in her life. And I'm a single parent, right? Uh, but I had to travel for work, and one doesn't predict these dates,
Yeah.
right? So one has a general sense of preparedness. What did I do at that point of time, other than feeling guilty and mad at myself? Well, uh, preparation in advance helped. Talking about it, supporting my daughter, preparing her in advance helped. Finding support within the family for someone to be with her physically when she needed someone adult, older, responsible with her at that time, identifying that person and making sure that at least someone like that is around was important. Some of these things can become a family affair, and as I mentioned earlier, that one has to build one circle of support around you. So some of that happened during that particular event. But the most important thing, Lavang, is to be available emotionally,
Mm.
even when you are away, in a board meeting, to a workshop, to traveling for field visits. Just being available emotionally
Mm.
to your family, especially to young children, was an important thing. In a later stage, my partner had an emergency surgery. Again, I was traveling for work. Uh, so, how do you prepare in advance for something like that?
Yes.
Uh, well, getting my daughters to be available, delegating responsibility to them, that you are young enough yet old enough to take responsibility to be around with your dad, to make this a family event was again important. But also being available emotionally was key during that period. I think these small big events, sickness, I remember my daughter had measles and I was on an international travel, and my parents had to travel thousands of miles to come to Delhi to be with my daughter when she was sick, because I was in a different time zone altogether. Um, so it's inconvenient, it's very, very stressful during that period. But y- our own internal resilience, thinking through the crisis, problem solving even from a distance, never leaves a woman. So being available even in your head when you are away physically is the reality that I have experienced. And by creating a more equitable world, by creating a world where moms and dads take equal responsibility, hopefully that emotional burden of constant decision making is something that we will have a fairer
Right.
world in the days to come.
I think, Sumitra, what you've said is so appropriate, because how we use our ecosystem, how we use our support system. You mentioned parents, but I must talk about the fact that neighbors and friends, they come through for us and we need to come through for them as well, because it's a two-way street. But having said that, and you've talked about different stages of your life as well, when your daughter had measles, to the PTMs, to the surgery that your partner went through. What about workplace culture? You know, when we look at it, there are so many policies all around us, right? And programs that most workplaces have nowadays. But what is it that you feel will help achieve more equality? Are there any improvements we can push for in the workplace that'll create like a truly level playing field? I work in an organization with almost 1,500 people, and I see a lot of policies that have come into play. What's your personal experience? And when you've obviously dealt with a wider sort of, if I may say, environment and ecosystem as well, what do you feel will work well for an equitable workplace?
Lavan, the good thing is that many of these discussions have now entered boardrooms,
Yes.
have entered HR, people and culture discussions. Many of these discussions have also come into focus in smaller teams, in support groups, both within our work environment and outside. Particularly, I'm very happy that there's so much talk now about emotional health, mental health, psychosocial support, the demystifying about seeking support for mental health issues. Some of these are getting mainstream. Of course, it's still very niche, very elite, and our attempt should be to universalize this whole idea that workers are persons first, and persons have personal requirements and needs, and policies have to reach out to those
Hmm.
individual requirements and needs also. uh, because I work with mobile creches, and therefore one of our biggest advocacy and influence agenda has been to talk about gender transformative childcare benefits. Basically to look at this whole motherhood penalty, but also mostly to build a culture of shared parenting and gender equitable societies also. So the shifting of the narrative from maternity leave to parental leave
Yes. Yes.
is important, right? Um, Creating a culture where male employees are supported and celebrated for taking paternity leave, uh, building a pipeline for affirmative action for men to focus on their domestic work responsibilities, on their caregiving responsibilities, is something that is important, and some of that is happening. And as I mentioned, some of the companies are really doing a very good job out of it.
Yes.
In many of the industry sectors that we work with, the construction, the tea garden, even governments, manrega, the rural employment guarantee programs, in many of these where the poorest of the poor workers, both men and women,
Hmm.
are working,
Hmm.
you can see companies coming forward and talking about a workplace worksite based creches, and encouraging their male workers also to participate in
Yes.
some of these parents meetings, in taking leaves, in taking equal responsibility in ferrying children to and from school and things like that. So these give hope that things will change, but the behavior change is going to take a long time. And therefore, while we are talking of flexible working hours, working from home, we're talking of safe residential complexes for single working women, we're talking of well-being coaches, leadership coaches for men and women, we're talking of family friendly policies as a part of the social security systems. Um, I think while the policy and the systems is important, I do want to say that, the culture is also important.
Yes.
Now, Lavang, despite the best of policies, if the culture within that organization doesn't celebrate these differences, this heterogeneity, and this diversity, and encourage people to talk about it, to embrace it, then it becomes very hard. Even having the best of policies is not going to work. Sometimes, even despite the best of policies, we see discriminatory practices. So, I would like to move the needle a little bit now to say that while we keep talking and creating and discussing about the best policies and its adherence to the policies, let's focus on culture building. Let's focus on what is the culture of diversity. What's the culture of a really gender transformative workplace environment and home environment? And that is difficult, it's tricky, it's messy, but that's where we begin our work from.
Sumitra, it's so much of insightful thinking that I've gone into, listening to you, in spite of the fact that I've been through a lot of this myself. I think what I do want to ask you is one of the things that you feel, and just if you could respond in in a single sentence, that one thing that we need to definitely be aware of to just wade our way through everything that happens around us. What's that one quality that we need to have?
The one topmost mantra for me, which I am very happy to share, is that lean in within your own experiences and you will find answers to help others, to support others. Because we've walked that path, we've dealt with real life issues, and real life experiences have the answers that can help someone else to navigate through this tricky, messy, guilt ridden, difficult phase. Um, be share to be open to sharing your life with others.
Interesting. Now, if you're okay, two, three things that I want to just ask you, and more from a perspective of younger women, people who've just started their careers, or even think of people who are from different economic and socio sort of backgrounds. Is that okay? Can I just go ahead and do like a fireside chat with you?
Sure.
Okay. So there is a big move. A promotion is on the cards, but it's going to require lots of travel, relocation. How are you going to weigh your career aspirations against your personal life?
Real life challenge, depending on what stage of your life in, balance how much disruption it's going to cost to your family versus you. Listen to your inner voice. Sometimes some of these solutions come straight out of intuition, and trust me, you will know when is the time to take that big leap for a promotion linked relocation. If sometimes you can't, then life will give you another chance.
Yes.
Have that hope.
Because when life gives you lemons, just make lemon water, right? At the end of the day.
Yes,
My
yes.
second quick one is crisis. A personal emergency is clashing with a work deadline. How are you going to manage both effectively without really getting overwhelmed?
Learn to delegate from the very start.
I know you
Create a circle of support around you, both at home and at work. And as I said earlier, it's okay to be an imperfectionist. You may not do the best job, but your good job is good enough for a lot of people in this
And
world.
because I said we're talking of people at various parts of their life, I think there's something called JOMO, the joy of missing out. We need to learn to
Yes,
do that, because like you said, yeah,
absolutely.
we just so fearful of what's going to happen when we are not around, as if the world's going to end. Okay, the next one is there's a surprise work trip that comes up. How will you ensure personal commitments are met even when you're away from home?
Sounds like the story of my life. Surprise visits coming up. I think if you've got your support system, what you've been also talking about at home with your neighbors, with your even wider work colleagues, also, you've got that sorted out. But I also want to say, Lavang, that, these surprise work visits and the travel visits, listen to your own body. Sometimes your own health also is, your body is telling you something. So at my stage now, I can say balance out those surprise visits also. Is it something that you've got to do, or can you delegate someone else also to do it?
My last one, which I'm sure you relate to, volcanic duty versus clientzilla. You have a critical deadline that coincides with your child's PTM or science fair. We've talked about PTM, but an award. How do you do both the tasks and prioritize and make sure commitments happen?
Well, something similar to you carrying your laptop in the dicky of your car. Sometimes that you are doing the science fair project at home with your child along with your own work calls, and sometimes you are taking your child to the workplace and you create a circle around your colleagues who are, helping your child with the science fair as you are dealing with work crisis. But a graduation, a big event, Lavang, really, these are personal moments. I regret missing out on some of these moments. And from my experience, I would say don't miss out on these personal moments, guys. They're important. They're important for you in later life, but they're important now for that child or for that family member. Be available. Don't make the stupid mistakes that I have made.
That's really good sound advice. Anything else that you want to tell us? And then we'll do a quick wrap up. I really wish we could have just gone on about this, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon again to talk about other challenges that women face.
Well, I think we've said a lot. I would like to just say that, one is that never feel alone, that you're the only one who's facing this crisis. There is a whole community of women around you who are going through similar life journeys. Two, always have your circle of support from family to friends to neighbors to work colleagues. You'll be surprised how many people will be out there to help you. Three, ask for help for sure. Don't hesitate to ask for help. And fourth, and the final one, respect your heart, mind, and soul. Listen to what your body and your heart is telling you. You will find the answers. And don't worry, work will still go on. The sky is not going to fall on our heads.
Life will go on. So, before we sign off, I have to say this, Sumitra. Today's conversation has been extremely enlightening and empowering. You've highlighted significant roadblocks women face in balancing their personal and professional lives with very interesting examples, and how the societal conditioning makes us feel like there's lack of support. It's our own infrastructure that we have to build eventually. We've discussed this role that supportive policies like a mandatory paternity leave and flexible work schedules, and importance of cultural shifts within families to share responsibilities equitably, and how important it is. Your personal experiences have given us that necessary sort of, if I may say, ingredients to prepare, delegate, and how emotional support is most important in maintaining that equilibrium. To achieve gender equity is an ongoing journey, right? And our discussion today is providing valuable insights and actionable steps to move closer to this goal. I'm sure we have to continue to support one another and work towards a more balanced and equitable world. But thank you so much, Sumitra. Your invaluable contributions, I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy. And thanks to our listeners for always being part of all our crucial conversations. So I wish you a lovely day. And like I said, I hope to catch up with you soon again on some other challenges that we all face on a daily basis.
Thank you very much, Lavang, and thank you, the Talentnomics group. It's been a pleasure spending this time with you, sharing about my personal experiences. And we continue to hold each other's hands and lift each other up, but we remember to include more men in our circle of support and hold their hands and sometimes lift them up also when
Yes.
required. So it's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to having more such conversations as we move ahead.
Thank you for joining us for this insightful episode of the Equiverse Voices. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on gender equity in our upcoming episodes. As always, our speakers have shown us various paths that leads towards building and fostering a new Equiverse. Let's take actions as individuals, as professionals, as family members towards building an Equiverse where everyone, regardless of their gender, can thrive and succeed. Do collaborate with us to build this new world. We would love to hear from you, your suggestions, your ideas, and your reactions to these conversations. Thank you.